Dell added, the old twinkle returning to his eyes. Well, 49,980 after today's expenses. He looked up at the stars, which were finally visible as the fog cleared. You know, Rodders is a good lad, Dell mused. He's got his GCEs, his ideas, but he needs me. He needs the old Del Boy touch. He leaned over the railing, shouting into the darkness, "Hear that, London? The Trotters are back, and this time next year. Well, you know the rest." Raquel laughed and pulled him back inside. As the door closed, the faint sound of a distant police siren echoed through the streets, a reminder that in Peckham, the hustle never truly ends. "Bonjour, Peckham," Dell whispered as he turned off the light. "Bonjour." Chapter 13, The Executive Suit. The following Monday, Rodney arrived at the flat wearing a suit that was so sharp it could have been used to carve a Sunday roast. It was a charcoal gray number, impeccably tailored, or at least it looked that way until he tried to sit down and the seams let out a high-pitched scream of protest. "You look like a proper businessman, Rodney," Dell remarked, stirring a cup of tea with a gold-plated spoon. A bit like a younger, slightly more gaunt version of Richard Branson, minus the island, and the airlines, and the charisma. "I'm taking my role seriously, Dell," Rodney insisted, checking his reflection in a toaster. "Cassandra says if I'm the managing director, I should project an image of authority. We're having an executive lunch today." "An executive lunch? Sounds posh," Dell said, his interest piqued. "Where are we going? The Ritz, Savoy, Bernie's Cafe?" "We're going to that new place, Le Petit Gourmet," Rodney said proudly. "It's very exclusive. You have to book a table 3 weeks in advance." 3 weeks? I could have grown my own potatoes in that time, Dell scoffed. "But go on, then. I'll come as your consultant. I've got some consulting to do anyway. I need to see a man about a consignment of, well, let's just say it's an atmospheric opportunity." The lunch was a disaster of epic proportions. The portions were so small that Dell spent 10 minutes looking for his steak with a magnifying glass. When the bill arrived, it was more than Rodney's weekly salary. 25 quid for a sprig of parsley and a piece of meat the size of a postage stamp, Dell whispered, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "I've seen more substance in a political manifesto." "It's about the experience, Dell," Rodney hissed back. "Experience? The only experience I'm having is the experience of starvation," Dell retorted. He leaned over to a nearby table where a wealthy-looking couple were dining. "Excuse me, sir, are you finished with that bread roll? Only my managing director here has a very sensitive appetite." Chapter 14, The Bargain from Brussels. A few days later, Dell returned to the flat looking like he'd just won the lottery. He was carrying a small, metallic briefcase that looked remarkably like the ones used by nuclear scientists in 1960s spy films. Gather round, everyone, Dell announced, placing the briefcase on the kitchen table. Rodney, Raquel, Cassandra, if you're finished with your executive bookkeeping, take a look at this. He flipped the latches and opened the case. Inside were dozens of small, silver canisters that looked like miniature fire extinguishers. What are they? Raquel asked, peering into the box. Hairspray, deodorant, anti-tank missiles. Better, Dell beamed. This, my dear family, is alpine oxygen. Fresh air, straight from the peaks of the Swiss Alps, compressed, purified, and ready to revitalize the weary lungs of the London workforce. Rodney stared at the canisters. Dell, you've bought a box of air? Not just air, Rodney. Alpine air. It's the latest craze in Brussels. All the top executives are using it to stay sharp. One puff of this and you're ready to take on the world. I've got 2,000 canisters arriving tomorrow. How much did they cost? Cassandra asked, her eyebrows reaching for her hairline. A bargain. $5,000 for the lot. We sell them at 5 quid a puff, a canister, and we're looking at a 10,000 pound profit. Tax-free, naturally. Dell, the air in London is free, Rodney pointed out. Dirty, yes, but free. Free but filthy. Rodney, this is pure. It's trotter fresh. I've already got a marketing slogan. Don't just breathe, peak performance. Chapter 15, The Charity Gala and the Smog. The timing of the Alpine Oxygen launch couldn't have been more perfect. A thick, yellow smog had descended upon London, turning the city into something resembling a giant bowl of pea soup. People were coughing, spluttering, and generally desperate for a breath of something that didn't taste like coal dust. This is it, routers, Dell shouted, loading the van. The market will be screaming for this. We're going to be heroes, like the Red Cross, but with better jewelry. They set up their pitch in the heart of Peckham. Dell was wearing a white lab coat he'd borrowed from a local dentist, and Rodney was standing by with a megaphone. Feeling sluggish, lungs feeling like a chimney sweep's waistcoat, Dell shouted, "Get your trotter fresh alpine oxygen. 1 puff and you'll think you're skiing in St. Moritz." A crowd gathered instantly. People were clamoring for the canisters, waving 5-pound notes in the air. For 2 hours, it was a frenzy. Dell was sweating, his lab coat stained with fog, but he was grinning like a Cheshire cat. I told you, Rodney, vision, that's what I've got. But then the first complaint arrived. A man who had just bought 5 canisters came back, looking less than revitalized. "Oi, this canister is empty," he shouted. "Empty? Impossible," Dell said, taking the canister. He pressed the nozzle. A faint, wheezing sound emerged, followed by a smell that was definitely not reminiscent of the Swiss Alps. In fact, it smelled remarkably like Brussels sprouts, Rodney whispered, sniffing the air.